disheartening to me. This whole notion that Brian Kemp is now saying that, oh, there's this message that Brian Kemp says that he is good on businesses, on small businesses. Well, and he will be good for Black businesses. Well, how so? He's been in office for 4 years. And what we know is of the millions of dollars of contracts that the state of Georgia gives out, Black voters, Black people who make more than 28%, almost 30% of the population in Georgia, have received less than 1% of the business contracts for the state of Georgia. Here's a person that says, Brian Kemp is saying that, yes, he cares about the people of Georgia and he is good for Georgia. Well, how so? Since he has been in office, 6 hospitals have closed, and we're on the verge of another hospital closing in Metro Atlanta. All of that is, yes. Can we place that in his lap? Absolutely, because he has refused to expand Medicaid, which is part of the reason why even the latest hospital said that it is closing, because it cannot handle the weight of so many uninsured patients that are coming in. And so if he expanded Medicaid, will actually bring in more than $1 billion in our state, that we could have saved those hospitals. We could save this hospital that is on the verge of closing. But he doesn't care about that, because he doesn't care about the people of Georgia. What he cares about is his own power. He has been voted.
We have 5 seconds. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Latasha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, speaking to us from Atlanta, Georgia. Oh, and tune in on November 8th for our 3-hour midterm election night special. We'll be broadcasting live starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. That does it for our show. I'm Amy Goodman. Stay safe.
WBNY Buffalo.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of 91.3 FM WBNY, the United Students Government at Buffalo State, or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can give us a call at 716-878-5104.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY.
I don't think we can assume that just...
We can't assume anything, okay? But this is L. Nathan here. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing you insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following the Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. We love to have you guys call. The number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We've also been permitted to take up space in the 21st century. We can't take up a lot of space because we only know a little bit of technology, but we have a technological wizard here, Willie H., and he does a live streaming of our program. Welcome, Willie.
Well, welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan Care. We coming live to you from WBNY Radio, from Facebook, from Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
We come from across the airwaves. And of course, if you're watching on Facebook or a medium, a visual medium, and you want to type in your questions and concerns and your observations, you can, and we'll respond to as many as we can while we're on the air. So if you don't want your voice on the air, you can type your words and have your words on the air. I want to remind everybody that there's still work that needs to be done for these people that were impacted by the Hurricane Fiona and mainly Hurricane Ian that destroyed so many parts of the southeastern shoreline of Florida, parts of South Carolina. I mean, they're talking something in the area, Willie. I think the last report I saw was $113 billion they project it's going to cost to rebuild everything that was destroyed.
Do you know how many people passed away? Or
the last count I saw, it was somewhere in that 150 to 200 person range, which is a lot of people, but it's a lot fewer than we thought it was going to be, given how widespread the damage was, from that that hurricane. But it's just important that people understand that not only do we have to help, I'm asking us to think, not just help, but think. Are there other ways that we can organize ourselves and our resources so that we are not so easily victimized by something like a hurricane?
Right.
I mean, the hurricane is powerful and whatnot, but we're human beings.
Right.
We're supposed to be intelligent. We should
Right.
be able to figure this out.
Right.
So what are the things that you worry about? You worry about flooding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, flooding means that water is coming from where the water is in the ocean and the seas and so on, and it gets onto the land. It's not rocket science. So how can you deal with that? Look at the ways that water attacks the land and then try to channel the water, someplace where it's not hurting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Find some way to either let the water drain back after the hurricane is over or reuse the water somehow,
Right.
take the salt out of the water and make it usable for agriculture.
That's
and so
correct.
on. I mean, I'm not the guy. I'm not that kind of agricultural engineer. I'm just saying there has to be a better way to address our infrastructure
Right.
than what we're doing right now, which is just leaving ourselves wide open for any kind of, weather disaster whatsoever. But the website you should go to if you have some resources, $10, $15, whatever you have that you can put, in the till over there, or if you want to volunteer to help with the cleanup of those areas damaged by the storm, you can go to ianresponse.org. That's IANRESPONSE.org. ianresponse.org. Let me say that again. IANRESPONSE.org. ianresponse.org. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking today. Sometimes I feel like you may think that I'm being condescending when I speak about some things. This is not about condescending. This is about helping us understand how people are taking control, people that are in power are using the airwaves and using the institutions of democracy to literally take democracy away from the vast majority of the people in this country. I need for you to just feel this, because whether you like a person or not, if that person is doing something that's going to erode your ability to function as a free citizen of the United States of America, how pretty you are, how cute you talk, how nice you dress, what organizations you're with, that don't count. What counts is you're doing something that's injuring us as citizens of the United States. And we've got to resist that. I mean, the people that call themselves progressives have to rise up, and make their voices heard. I went to an article written by David Whitman and Glenn Altshuler. It was written in the Hill magazine. It's one of those online magazines that gets published out of Washington, D.C., talking about Florida's educational gag order, more extensive and damaging than you realize. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill that he calls the Stop Woke Act. You should not even be allowed to name a bill, the Stop Woke Act. Obviously, you're trying to insult somebody, by making that the title of the bill. But that's what he got it called, and there's enough people that vote in Florida for people like him that bill actually, got legs. He declared, this was in April, he declared that the legislation would provide public school students and their parents, quote, freedom from having oppressive ideologies imposed upon you without your consent. Who decides that something is oppressive? Who decides if something is an ideology? Who decides whether it's being imposed upon you? Who's the God that makes these decisions up, and imposes, this decision tree on the rest of us?
Right.
You may not like something in history. Maybe you feel like, the Native Americans should get credit, for discovering America because they were here 14,000 years before the first Europeans got to America. Maybe you think that the Native Americans ought to get, a little credit for that. But that's not something to say that you're not going to teach in history that Europeans, and across the Atlantic Ocean and colonized North America. You're still going to say that they colonized North America. It doesn't change the fact that the Native Americans were here 14,000 years earlier, right? One doesn't cancel out the other. And if you're a Native American and you feel bad because somebody's talking about the European colonization of America taking place and overwhelming the people that were physically already here, if you feel bad about that, you still can't teach that it didn't happen. How are you going to teach that the Europeans didn't colonize North America? You couldn't even think something like that.
Actually, in school, I remember in school, well, anytime we learned about the Indians or seen it on TV, they were savages. So basically, we was, I don't know, getting rid of the savages.
That was when you and Tonto made friends, right?
Yeah.
with the silver horse and whatnot, right? You all were cool.
Right. That's what was taught.
It's that sort of stuff, right? So I asked the question, isn't the assertion that America was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, isn't that an ideology being imposed on all citizens without their consent? Because I know for certain that they didn't have me in the queue when they were talking about all men being created equal, endowed by their creator by certain inalienable rights, among them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I wasn't in the queue. I was a man. My wife is a woman. My daughter's a woman. But we weren't in the queue.
Yeah, I see some laws that basically was saying we weren't part of that.
So how does Ron DeSantis get to say that you are not allowed to teach that America built itself on the foundation of oppressing and exploiting people that look like me? You can't teach that because you claim somebody in your culture, somebody there felt bad. They felt ashamed, or something about the European conquest of America and the way that so many people who were not European descendant Americans, how they were treated in this country. The fact that you feel bad about that is irrelevant. These are facts, right? And so I asked the question, isn't the idea that America formed into the leading economy in the world out of the work ethic of the founding fathers and American settlers, isn't that an ideology being imposed on parents without their consent? I can take you to data right now that shows you that by 1850, the United States had the third largest economy on earth. The place wasn't born until 1787. Its constitution wasn't ratified until 1787. So we're talking about in a span of less than 80 years, the United States went from not existing at all to being the third largest economy in the world. And they tell you that that happened because of the great work ethic, the exceptionalism, of the American, European settlers, and their craftiness and their ingenuity and their strength and their power and so on. They don't tell you that the reason why that occurred is because plantation crops, indigo, rice, cotton, wheat, but mostly cotton. This country had become the largest producer of cotton in the world. Other people that used to produce cotton stopped bothering to produce it because the American cotton, was so much better. It was so well taken care of in terms of the people that were working those cotton fields. Who's working those cotton fields?
Black folks.
Who did the who did the planting? Who did the fertilizing? Who did the whatever you call, the agricultural caretaking, to bring
Black
these
people.
crops? All Black people, right? I mean, mostly the white people that were involved were people that were responsible for directing, or having authority over Black people, but not the people that did the work themselves.
It's kind of similar today when you think about it.
This is America. That's why we always say this is America, right? But to say that you're not going to teach the fact that the economy of the United States became the third largest economy in the world by 1850, less than 80 years after the place was born, had become the third largest economy in the world, you're not going to teach that that happened because of the backbreaking effort that was being put forth or extracted from African people in this country. You're not going to teach that because it's going to make some modern, person feel bad. Oh, that makes me feel bad. It makes me feel like my ancestors were not really good people. Write this down. A lot of your ancestors were not good people. Write that down, okay? Don't miss that. See, but Ron DeSantis says you can't teach that. Isn't it the ideology that it is a parental woman's responsibility to take care of her children and her household being imposed upon students, parents, without their consent? That a woman, regardless of her skills, regardless of her intelligence, regardless of the opportunities that are available to her, if she gets pregnant, she has to drop out of the career stuff and she has to drop into the family stuff because that's her responsibility. Even if the husband or the man, even if he don't show up, if he leaves, it's still her burden, her responsibility. That's an ideological framework that we live with in this country. Do you know that even today, I don't know if we really get this, even though we've been sort of, better on the equal opportunity front, for men and women.
Right.
Women are actually get more opportunities to go to college than men do. Right. Women have actually accelerated more in terms of their percentage of the job.
Especially in the Black community.
Right. In the job market and so on. So a lot of those things have happened. But if you look at a couple, a man and a woman with kids, you'll find that 75% of the work to maintain that household is being done by the woman, not being done, even though they both have a job.
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
See, so there's an ideological context that we grow up in, and we don't even think about it. We just, get pregnant, and then, you take care of the kids, and I'll put the garbage out, Yeah. we sort of we slot it into these roles.
Yeah. That's
an ideology that is accepted in this country.
Right.
But if you were to talk about that, Ron DeSantis says, well, you would make me feel bad. You'd make me feel like I was a terrible person because I was oppressing women. You should feel like you're a terrible person for oppressing women because you shouldn't be oppressing women, period. Right. What are you talking about? Right. I mean, if I was walking around the United States robbing people's houses and whatnot, you wouldn't say, well, it'll make people feel bad. Nate's family will feel bad if you found out that he was robbing people's houses. You wouldn't say something like that. Why does Ron DeSantis get to talk like this? The Stop Woke Act blocks workplace trainings and classroom instruction in public schools, in colleges and universities that espouses, promotes, advances, these are his words, inculcates, I'm not even sure he even knows what the word inculcate means, right? But inculcates or compels belief in divisive concepts.
He probably read it somewhere.
Who decides if something is divisive? When I was in Hughes, Alabama, and I saw a man stop my grandfather from being able to vote, fingering his gun in the polling place, asked my grandfather what he was doing. He said he came to vote. He said, I'm sure you didn't want to vote here. And he's fingering, his Roscoe.
Wow.
Right? That's the America I grew up in.
Wow.
That might not be the America that you grew up in, but that's the America that I grew up in.
I saw a little bit of that, Mr.
Okay.
Not like that, but.
And so for me to teach that was being done across the board throughout the South and maybe in a number of places across the North, for me to teach that, for you to say that I can't teach that reality, that truth, because it makes you feel bad is insulting to me. It's insulting to my reality, right? If you want to feel better, show me that people in your lineage did wrong, but you are doing right. That's how you get to feel better. Right. You don't get to feel better by denying the fact that your foreparents did wrong.
Right.
I don't deny it when my foreparents did wrong. Right. They did something they shouldn't have done. We own it.
Yeah, well, we have to own it because we usually get penalized.
That's on
killed,
you.
Put in jail or whatever.
You join some little posse and whatnot. You trying to control, 2 blocks in your neighborhood and whatnot, and somebody ends up getting killed.
Yep.
You have to own that.
Right.
You can't say that it makes other Black people feel bad because you're teaching people that some Black people did something wrong.
Right.
Right. You got to own what you do wrong.
Right.
Why aren't they responsible to own, what they do wrong?
Right.
but they get into these positions. Now they become governors of states,
Mhm.
and they're in a position to actually dictate what you can teach in that state.
Mhm.
Right? They got people in Texas that have taken custody of your school books, and new school books that have been published since maybe the mid of 2000s, 2005, 2006, since that time period, have taken out the word slavery. They talk it, they say it's oppression. They take out, you can't call somebody a slave.
Mm.
You can't say that, right? So they're called forced laborers, and they just they're euphemizing, the way that you talk about things, and anything that would sort of make people feel that you as a class of people, were a part of a faction of people doing wrong in this country.
Right.
They want to wipe that out,
Right.
to eliminate that from what you get to teach.
Right.
How can you be educating people if you were to take that kind of education away from them? Right. So I don't know if you all are feeling out there, but it grinds on me, that this goes on. Recently, these conservative state legislatures have voted to restrict the teaching of what they call critical race theory. What is critical race theory?
What is critical race theory?
Critical race theory is a theory of how you understand how laws have been formed and how systems have been formed in a way that in a way that is disadvantageous, if I put it that way, for minority people, for people that are in a population group that is largely marginalized in this country. So for example, if in Alabama right now, you have 7 congressional districts in the state of Alabama. Is it, I think it's Alabama or Mississippi. I'm not sure which of those states I'm talking about, but you have 7 congressional districts. If I'm not mistaken, in Alabama, 27% of the people that live in Alabama are African-American people.
Right.
So when they divide up the 7 congressional districts, you would assume that at least 2 of those districts would be largely African-American population districts, because they make up 27% of the people that live in that state, right? So you think that they're 1 out of every 4, people that live in Alabama are African-American. You would expect that out of 7 congressional seats, at least 2 would be in areas where there was a majority or close to majority African-American population, but that's not the case. They rewrote under this following the last census, when they did the redistricting, they redesigned or reconstructed the district lines so that 75% of all of the African people that live in Alabama are all in 1 congressional district. So they can be the majority vote for 1 person, and the other 6 districts, you only have 10 or 12% African people in those districts, right? So they just redrew the lines to put people where they want, even though the people are not even contiguous. You got people that are in South Alabama that are in the same congressional district that stretches all the way into North Alabama. That's insane. That's not what the congressional office was designed for. We're supposed to provide a broad-based representation of the population in each state,
right,
going into the House of Representatives, representing the people in that state.
Right.
That broad representation of people scattered across the state. Whereas a senator has to represent the entire state. One, excuse me, one senator represents the entire state in the Senate. But in Congress, you got 435 people representing the 50 states, in the United States. So this is an oppressive thing, because it takes away literally 50% of the representation of these African people in the state of Alabama in the House of Representatives. So the arguments that Florida has advanced to defend the Stop Woke Act against multiple legal challenges goes much further. In response to claims that the legislation violates the First Amendment, this is what I wanted to get to in this discussion, violates the First Amendment, is constitutionally vague and racially discriminatory. It says lawyers for the state have asserted that state college curricula and in-class instruction are something that you all have probably never heard of before, called government speech. Now, you probably heard of free speech, right?
Right. Free speech.
You
yeah.
probably heard of correct speech.
Right.
Have you ever heard of government speech?
Mm.
Well, this is enshrined in decisions that have been made in the last 20 years by this so-called Supreme Court of the United States. Because everything that calls itself supreme ain't supreme. We'll come back to that another day, right? Everything that says it's supreme is not supreme. But the Supreme Court in this country has allowed the elevation of a concept called government speech. And it says not the speech of the educators themselves. That's not government speech. They say that there is no purported right to academic freedom under the Supreme Court decision, because if you're in a state university, that's a government institution. If you're a faculty member in that university and you speak, your words are being spoken as a function of your work as a employee of that state university system.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, all your speech that you make in the course of your working and so on is government speech, not your free speech. Now, you tell me how you can be a teacher and you can teach only government speech and not teach your beliefs, you know, what you have felt in the course of your life, your insights, your perspectives.
Yeah.
How can you teach if you're not bringing all of that, you know, into the equation, right?
You got to bring perspective and depth to the conversation.
So, I mean, historic, and I'm certain that almost every person you know believes that when you open your mouth and something comes out of your mouth that we call speech, it's free speech.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you say, you know, fire, shout fire in a crowded, you know, movie theater, it's still free speech. It's not legal, but it's still free speech, right? You shouldn't endanger other people with your speech. You should be held accountable for that. But free speech, you always understood to be your ability to say anything you wanted to say, anywhere you wanted to say it, anytime you wanted to say it. That's what free speech, you know, has actually been, or what we've understood it to be. But we've been under a cloud. Since the mid-2000s, the government has actually challenged that concept. Florida's argument is accepted, if accepted by the courts, poses an existential threat to public schools that could destroy the commitment to free and unfettered inquiry, and has made American colleges and universities preeminent throughout the world. And it is by no means certain that the courts will not side with Florida in defending the constitutionality of this Stop Woke Act, which is an insulting name for a law in the first place. Florida has cited the 2006 U.S. Supreme Court decision of Garcetti versus Ceballos, a case that involved the right of the district attorney of Los Angeles to discipline a deputy district attorney who criticized his supervisor's actions. It used to be that you could criticize your supervisor's actions, and that was free speech. But under this decision by the Supreme Court in Garcetti versus Ceballos, that's just not free speech. Your Department of Justice in California, your mouth moving is the Department of Justice's speech, not your speech. It's government speech, not your speech, right? So that's what this 5-4 decision decreed. It decreed that when public employees make statements pursuant to their official duties, the First Amendment does not insulate their communications from employer disciplines. Supreme Court Justice David Souter warned that the decision could imperil First Amendment protection of academic freedom in public colleges and universities, not private colleges, but in public colleges and universities, where teachers necessarily speak and write pursuant to official duties. Since the 2006 decision by Ceballos, federal courts have disagreed on whether an academic freedom exception exists. In a string of decisions in the Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth Circuit Courts of Appeals, they have concluded that the Garcetti decision does not apply in the academic context of a university. In other words, you have free speech that is protected, and your speech is not government speech.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2007, a year after Garcetti, in the case of Hong versus Grant, a district court judge ruled that the University of California is entitled to unfettered rights when it restricts statements an employee makes on the job and according to his or her professional responsibilities. That was reaffirmed in a case of Capehart versus Haas in 2011. They noted that the courts have routinely held that even the speech of faculty members of public universities is not protected when made pursuant to their professional duties. As the Stop Woke Act makes its way through the courts, it is essential to understand what's at stake here. Judge Souter noted prior to Garcetti and the Supreme Court decision in 2006, recognized that universities occupy a special niche in our constitutional tradition, and that academic freedom has transcendent value, not merely to the teachers concerned, but to all of us. In the guise of preventing indoctrination by annulling faculty members' right to academic freedom, the Stop Woke Act whitewashes or erases American history in favor of government-enforced indoctrination. Will teachers be disciplined or fired, for example, if they point out that the state's education policies going back into the 19th century often established deeply disparate treatment by race and family income? Or that a criminal statute in Florida prohibited an unmarried interracial couple from living together and occupying the same room at nighttime until the Supreme Court declared it to be unconstitutional in 1964. Or that in 2022, a judge struck down Florida's restrictions on mail-in ballots and drop boxes because they had a disproportionate impact on Black voters. Where does this all end up? Who will decide whether this information is objective or the espousal of an oppressive ideology? Who will decide whether it made someone feel uncomfortable or guilty? Will the students make that decision? Will the parents make that decision? Will politicians in Tallahassee make that decision? Will judges make that decision? Will the decision be made by a majority vote of the people in this country? What is to prevent Florida and other states from barring any speech by faculty that state officials dislike? That's the ledger, that's the ledge that we're on right now. And if we're not careful, we're going to lose our democracy. They are attacking our democracy on every front. You know, they literally are taking away your votes. They can ignore, just decertify or not certify. They have to decertify your votes. They'll just not certify your votes and then vote, you know, what they want over the top of whatever it is that you voted for, you know, in your district.
Right.
All these things are taking place right now. And people are making these assertions about inflation, you know, and, well, you know, Dr. Oz, you know, he's stronger on crime. Is he stronger on you having the freedom of a citizen of the United States that you thought that you have enjoyed for all of these 245 years? That's the decision that you got to make right now. Listen, we got to take a quick break. We do have sponsors, but before to talk you all on the other side of the break, here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM, WBNY.
What if one day you went to your secret hiding place and instead of what you came for, you found a phone number, 1-800-662-HELP? What would you do? Would you stop and give it some thought? Before drugs take their toll on you and your family, know that there is help. You can quit. For help with drug use, call 1-800-662-HELP for free and confidential information and treatment referral, or go to samhsa.gov/know-the-risks.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY.
All right, so welcome back. This is L. Nathan Hare here at Living for the People. We were talking about, you know, the fact that our freedoms are being challenged on so many fronts. And it is really important that we wake up and not let people delude us by getting us off on tangents. I get what's going on in Ukraine. You know, I get that you all think that solar, you know, batteries are better than gas powered, whatever, you know, vehicles, et cetera. I get all of those issues that we're talking about, but all of those issues pale against the issue of whether or not you still have the ability to be free in this country. There are other countries that have TVs. Russia has TVs. They have what do you call those walking telephones you all have in your hands, iPods or Androids, you know, and so on, right? I mean, those things exist in other countries too.
Oh yeah.
What's the distinction between their country and the country that you live in here in the United States? So that you have the ability to say what you want to say, to do what you want to do, to pursue what you want to pursue, to live where you want to live, to associate with whoever you want to associate with. This is your free base of citizenship in the United States. That's what's at risk here. They're actually doing this work. They're trying to take away your freedoms completely. And they're seducing you into getting them to do it. You're authorizing them to do it. You know, when they voted for Joe Biden in 2020, he got, you know, 52, whatever it was, % of the vote. They said it was a great big number. It was almost 8 million, you know, more votes that he got than Donald Trump got in 2020. But here was the thing that people didn't pay attention to. Down ballot, those people that were the senators and candidates and the congressional candidates, those people that ran the state boards of election and so on, those people, they voted for the Republicans for those groups because they allowed you to get sucked into believing that, well, we need to have, you know, a majority of one party in the legislative session that's different than the party in the executive, you know, section of government, so that, you know, they'll have to contend with each other. It'll create balance, and, you know, we'll get better decisions, you know, from them. That's not what's happened. What's happened is Mitch McConnell has used his ability to block legislation to try to prevent anything from being done whatsoever. He actually said when Joe Biden got elected, as he said when Barack Obama got elected, he said that I'm going to do everything I can to see to it that Joe Biden is ineffective as the president of the United States. So he's worked hard to get that done, but you don't hold him to account for that.
Right.
You blame Joe Biden for inflation. Joe Biden have anything to do with, you know, with inflation. Joe Biden had nothing to do with police departments pulling back from doing their work as police officers because they were being punished. Some of them were being punished for murdering African people for kicks.
Right.
I mean, maybe I'm overstating that, but, you know,
because they had the power to do so.
Devin Shavin, you know, kneeling for almost 10 minutes on the neck of George Floyd with a camera rolling, watching him do it, and him grinning while he was doing it. And people jumping up and down saying, well, he's just doing police work. You know, you should not be holding him to account for that. Well, if you can't hold him to account, who can you hold account for anything?
Right.
Right. So this is that reality. But I know we had a
Facebook comment.
Right.
We have a Facebook viewer who says, oh, no, we need to rebuild after hurricane damage. Where did all the migrant workers go? Ron DeSantis.
You know, and whatever your feeling is about the migrant workers, at the end of the day, they are human beings, even if they are here illegally, even if they should not be running across the border and taking a job that supposedly an American, you know, would have taken if the migrant worker wasn't in that job. Even if that's how you feel, you still have to have a value system that treats human beings as human beings.
Right.
Period. Ron DeSantis literally kidnapped people in Texas, took them to Florida. So this was not money being spent on something that was happening in Florida. This was money being spent on something that was happening in Texas. You took that Texas problem and brought it to Florida and then mailed it on a plane to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, or Martha's Vineyard, wherever that is, you know, in Massachusetts. How is that legal? How could you take state money and use state money that way? How could you treat people that way? They are still doing this. They're kidnapping people, taking them to some place, some unknown destination, literally dropping people off, no contacts, not able to speak the language, not connected to anything, not in some institution. They're just dropping them off on the sidewalk and then leaving them.
But these are not U.S. citizens.
No, they're not U.S. citizens. And so, but I just need for you to understand, my father taught me this when I was very young. He says, the first time you do wrong, you make it easier for you to do wrong the second time.
That's right. Especially
you
when
have
you get
to
away
make a
with it.
decision. I know my brother's here, right?
Yeah.
You grew up in the same culture I grew up in, right?
Yes, sir.
You put your comment in there too.
Well, as far as that goes, yeah, you know, doing wrong and you know, being looked at in that manner, you know, as far as well, I'm going to take it back to the Stop Woke Act. I'm
Right.
I'm just messed up behind it. You know,
It's hard to process how something like that even gets voted on.
I can't even fathom it. It's
Right.
it's just kind of crazy to me.
So, but it's the craziness that we're going to have to confront as a society. We're not confronting it right now. Now, I understand in Georgia, we didn't get a chance to talk about this because I want to talk a little bit about these test scores. But before we get to that, I just want you to know that in Georgia, because you have such an intense contest going on over the governor's race between Governor Kemp and Stacey Abrams, who's a high-profile, you know, candidate from the sort of left side of the political spectrum. I don't think that she's going to win because I don't think that the Georgia voters really grasp the significance of keeping people in power who are actually underwriting the destruction of the democracy in this country. Georgia has rules right now that, let's say you're the county board of elections for somebody county, Fulton County, you know, whatnot, right? And let's say that it turned out that 60% of the vote, you know, in Fulton County went for Stacey Abrams rather than going for Governor Kemp. Well, Governor Kemp could then say to the Secretary of State, that don't look right. You know, Fulton never votes that way. You know, there must be something wrong with the vote. And simply not decertify the vote, just simply not certify the vote. They just don't bother to certify the vote at all. Just that we don't accept, you know, what happened in that county. And then they can appoint the state legislature and have the state legislature vote on behalf of the state for Fulton County. Not the 5 million citizens that live here, whatever it is that live in Fulton County, but the state legislature would actually vote in place of them. That is autocracy. That's what this means. I mean, we're on the lips of, on the cusp of fascism in this country. That's what's going on. That's in law right now. That's not something that I'm saying could happen. That is in law right now. We have to stop this now. I've been talking about this for years. You know, we keep letting people minimize our understanding of things that are really challenging our ability to function as citizens in the United States. We're allowing people to minimize that and to maximize the things that are not the most important things. Now, don't get me wrong. Crime is important. You know, I saw on a news broadcast a couple of days ago, somebody took a hammer, you know, and beat, you know, another person, a victim, with a hammer.
Wow.
Of course that's wrong. Of course we need to get that person and pull them off the streets or whatever the law allows us to be able to do to punish that person for that behavior.
Right.
But that one person's behavior does not trump having a state with, you know, 8 or 9 or 10 million voters and having their votes suppressed by the state elected officials in that state. You follow?
Yeah.
You can't allow a governor to become the king of a state.
Right.
You know, and to do whatever the governor feels like doing. That's what Ron DeSantis is doing. We have to fight that. Every tooth, with every nail, we have to do everything possible to resist. That's how we got into the situation in our schools. Because, you know, we don't talk about this. In 2020, this COVID-19 virus, you know, got legs in the United States. Now, they knew that this thing was coming back in November of 2019. And the reason why I say this is because they sent a contingent of 4 researchers from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to I think it's Wuhan Wuhan province in China, sent them there because they had heard that there was an outbreak of a disease they hadn't seen before. So you had American scientists that went with the team. They saw what was going on. They came back, but they took the position that, well, it's not a pandemic yet. It's still just in Wuhan. So they just left it there, and sort of had some correspondence relationship with the people in China, but didn't really, put muscle behind preventing this from going someplace else. So what happens is you get a guy who's got family in Wuhan, but he's an American citizen, a Chinese guy. He travels to visit his family in Wuhan, eats some of whatever it is they eat in their meat markets.
Wuhan clan. A viewer.
I wasn't going to go there, but I got that. I had the clan thought too, but I didn't want to say it. Right. But I appreciate you saying it for me.
It was a Facebook viewer, Wuhan clan.
But yeah, the Wuhan folks. Right? But what happens is that person goes back to the West Coast of the United States and heads from California up to, I believe, Oregon, and he gets sick because he was already sick. He just didn't know it. Now the sickness begins to manifest itself, and he's in the clutches of something he don't know what to do with. His throat's, constricted. He's got extreme headaches. He's sweating like a pig. He's coughing. He can't sleep. He can't sit. He can't stand. He's in the mix, and they're doing all the things they know to do, trying to help him. All the while that was occurring, his sister, his brother, his mother, his father, the people downstairs, the people next door, all these people that were at the airport, all the people that he touched from the time he left Wuhan province in China to the time he got home in Oregon, every one of them were exposed to this COVID-19. Before you know it, there's 15 cases. Then there's 150 cases. Then there's 1,000 cases. That's what happened, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you all hired a president. I'm not mad at you, but you hired a president. You called him Donald Trump, Daffy, Donald Trump. You hired him. And his response to the COVID-19 crisis was to shut the economy down. Mm-hmm. He shut the economy down. Roughly 40%, 42% or so of the economy was shut down by his orders. Now, the reason why he did that was to prevent us from touching each other,
right? Correct.
As much as possible,
right?
Because it wasn't mysterious. People touching each other was the primary vector on how that virus got from person A to person B.
Or breathing on each other.
People breathing on each other, shaking each other's hand, hugging each other, doing other kind of familiar stuff that y'all do, with each other. We won't talk about that on the air, but y'all was doing some stuff that, sweat pops and whatnot, right? And people got sick.
Right.
Wisdom would say, everywhere we see that somebody got sick from this stuff, let's put a perimeter around that place. Then let's test everybody inside that perimeter and see who else has gotten sick. And let's extend the perimeter until we've contained all of the area where the virus exists. Then you got to say to the people that live in those areas, you have to stay in that area. If we have to pay you some unemployment money to keep you alive, until this virus, goes away, we'll do that. If we have to send doctors to you because we don't want you traveling around the community, we'll do that. Mm-hmm. We'll do testing ourselves. We'll do all the kind of things that need to be done to make sure that you can live, but you got to stay inside the area that is contaminated. Mm-hmm. All of the people that are outside that area, you want to keep them from entering the areas that are contaminated. So those are the rules that you make up. If you had done that, instead of having whatever it was, 33 million people, 35 million people get infected by this virus, you'd have had maybe 20 or 30,000 people get infected. Right. We would never have gone through what we've gone through right now. But that's because you hired a president who didn't know how to govern, didn't know how to think his way through a problem.
Right.
So he just used a sledgehammer to do something that could have been done with a fly swatter.
Right. So instead, like you just said, instead of 30 million people, it could have maybe been a million people.
Exactly.
And the economy would have went on.
And just think about the consequences of that. We spent, and we've talked about this on the air, between 2020 and the middle of 2022, we spent in excess of we're still spending money.
Oh, we're still spending
$6 trillion. Now, where does that money come from?
That's from
You
us.
weren't making that money right now. We didn't have a $1 trillion surplus, in the U.S. budget, now we had a deficit, right? In fact, the deficit was 1.4 or 1.5 trillion dollars for the year that we're in right now. The year that ended September 30th, I believe the deficit is somewhere in that 1.4, 1.5 trillion dollar range.
Wow.
So we were actually gone $7.5 trillion in the hole. Where does that money come from? Well, you don't have to ask. I know the answer. The money comes from the future. It comes from money that you haven't made yet.
Wow.
Here's the problem when you count on something that hasn't happened. If you make a decision today that binds you today, where you actually have now endured the cost of something today, but the money to pay for it doesn't happen, doesn't even get created until tomorrow, what happens if tomorrow doesn't come?
Wow.
What happens if instead of making $100 billion a day, we only made $75 billion a day, and we're short $75 billion a day in the future? How do you pay for the bill that you made in the past? That's the problem. That's the problem that we're in right now. That's why you have the inflation in this country that you have right now, because essentially borrowing $6 trillion from the future, you made $6 trillion worth of spending available yesterday. People been spending that money.
Right.
They're buying bread and cars, and they got those tires. When you stop your car and the tires keep moving, you know that, right? They call them spinners.
Yeah.
I don't understand why anybody would bother to buy something like that, but that goes on in this country.
It looks good to some people.
And if you were my wife, you'd say, well, I got to go to the Delta Ball, on Saturday. I need a new dress. I need new nylons. I need new gloves. I need a new hat. I said, but baby, you got 3 closets in this house full of all that stuff. You got stuff you haven't worn for 14 or 15 years. You haven't worn. She said, yeah, that's old now. I can't wear that now.
Right.
But we're spending that $6 trillion.
Now, Mr. Hare, you brought a fact that you was talking about your COVID, and you were basically saying that the amount of people that got sick, that's happening today.
Right. Today, I looked it up before we came on the program on Monday. 76,000 people got infected on Monday.
Right.
Just Monday alone.
Right.
Now, they shut the economy of the entire country down by 41% in 2020 when 35,000 people were getting sick.
Wow.
So if 35,000 people getting sick meant shut the country down, what does 75,000 mean to you? Okay. But what they've done is they turn off the information machine.
Right.
See, the information machine is
so
the one
people don't
where,
panic.
Right. All the websites and all of the TV stations. Right. Coronavirus, COVID-19, and now all of a sudden you don't hear a word about it. Who told you that today 80,000 people got infected today? Who told you that today? Where did you see that anywhere today? In fact, if you go to the websites that you normally go to get this information, the COVID-19, websites and whatnot, you'll find you have to do a lot of work to figure out what actually happened on an individual day. Now they reconfigure things where they got charts, a column slides along that tells you what day it is or what month it is, and what the incidence was of infection and so on. But it's something that you have to do some work, to get to the information, because they don't want you to know the information now. Now they want you to think that everything is cool, but things are not cool. Not only are things not cool, you have 75, 80,000 people getting infected a day, and you have roughly 200 million people in this country that have already been vaccinated at least twice.
Wow, that's right.
So that means only 130 million people are left over that have not been vaccinated.
Right.
And yet you've got double the amount of infections going on in that population of the country.
That is crazy.
See, if we were on it, if we weren't letting ourselves being pushed around, by these Ron DeSantis's and these Greg Abbott and these other, so-called conservatives. I don't consider them to be conservatives, but whatever they call, they're just right wing, right? We're being so hurted by them that we keep chasing the things that they're talking about rather than chasing the things that are most important for the health and welfare of the citizens of this country.
Well, I got a comment from one of the Facebook viewers talking something. He says, GA Governor Kemp was the vote suppressor and chief, a crook, and even he couldn't stomach Trump request for 11,780 votes.
And I'm telling you, I have not been able to get this out of my head. We talked about this when it happened. Donald Trump actually calls Raffensperger, how do you say his name? The Secretary of State for Georgia. He calls him up and says, we just need 11,781 votes. Just one more. Just need one more. 11,781 votes. You say this, people are on his end of the phone. People are on Donald Trump's end of the phone. There's probably a half a dozen, 8 people that heard this conversation. How illegal can something be? That's like saying that, yeah, we're going to go into Fort Knox. I got the code, and we're just going to get like, $100 million in gold, and then we'll leave. And you say it on the air. Now, whether you do it or not is irrelevant. The fact that you said it makes it a conspiracy that you intended to do it. That's a crime in and of itself. He actually commits the crime of interfering with a government election. He commits the crime on tape. And yet to this day, people talk about it, but they don't do anything about it. Why hasn't he been arrested already for this, right? I mean, I know we got 5 minutes, and I wanted to can I just tell you a little bit about this issue with test scores?
Yeah, go ahead.
I tried to explain to people when we were in the mix in 2020, and they were shutting down all of the schools, and they were saying, we're going to have everybody on remote education. Buffalo Public Schools sent little tablet computers out to every child, in the school district, and all of that. And it all looked real, modern and, innovative, as a response. I said at the time, this is not going to work, because the people that we're trying to get to do this are not used to working that way. Kids are not going to come home at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. They got a little tablet computer here, and somebody says at 11 o'clock, teacher Joseph is going to, be on online. You plug in, and then he's going to teach you something.
Yeah.
Because they just left the computer on, and whenever they knew it was your time to be on the air, they just hit a button and said they were present, and they went on playing and whatnot. They were
video
outside.
games or whatever.
No telling what they were doing.
My son, we had to wake him up.
Right?
Get
because
up.
Kids just they're not motivated that way, right? And so they're using the computers to do something other than their computer work.
That's true.
They're doing all kinds of stuff.
Right.
What happened was, because we allowed these people to be so undirected, instead of trying to find other ways of educating these children, you got community centers, you got churches, all over the place. You can create learning clusters where you, instead of having 1,500 kids on a campus, you got 15 kids, that are over at this church, 12 kids over at another church, 50 kids over at a community center. You use the assets in your community, and then you use your computer systems to drive daily education for those children, and you wire the teachers up or the parents up so that they know what that education is going to be. They can read it, and then they can support what the children are learning. That would have kept the learning process going. The other thing that people just don't seem to understand, if you don't learn to read by the time you're 7 or 8 years old, by the time you get through the 3rd grade, it's very unlikely that you're going to be a good reader the rest of your life, because your mind, your biology, and the physical makeup of your mind, combined with the growth of your psyche, those things are so interdependent that if you don't get it done in the right time frame, the biology of the person starts to change in a way that takes some of their ability to learn the new things. Like you learn language. You learn language without even trying to learn, right? You just get born, wait for your mother to feed you, and whatnot, right? Mom, I'm wet again. Mom, I'm feeling cold. You go from there to a year later, you're talking. How'd you learn that language? It was automatic. It was autonomic. You absorbed it, right? But that skill of being able to absorb by just being in the presence of something and watching something and imitating in your mind what you're watching and what you're hearing. That's how you learn how to talk and walk and think and so on. But that skill, that begins to dwindle as you get older and you have more and more experiences, and now you're basing your future decisions based on your previous experiences. That tends to take away that osmosis kind of learning skill that you had. As a consequence, you have to rebuild the way that you're educating children around the fact that their ability to learn new things is based on their experience in learning things prior to that point. You gotta keep that engine going, for these young people, and we're not doing that. So the consequence is we have literally half the kids in this country are 2 years behind in their math and their reading skills as a result of what we've done over the course of this time period. We have to fix this. My position is you should make everybody start over. If you were in the third grade in 2020 and now it's 2022, I'd make you do third grade all over again. I'd make you do fourth grade. Everybody got to go back to where they were and prove to me that you got third grade skills. Then prove to me that you got fourth grade skills. Then prove to me that you got fifth grade skills so that you get caught up. If that means you don't get ushered into the world until you're 19 or 20 or 21 years old, well, nasty break. You just getting ushered into the world when you're 19, 20. You had a disaster happen to you. You had the coronavirus virus plague that hit you. Well, that's why you're in that position. But we're not going to solve it by not fighting it, by not recognizing it, by not doing something about it. You have to do something about something that has happened to people. If you don't, those consequences will stay in those people's lives forever, and we're going to pay the price. You know what happens when you got a large population of uneducated people? Crime, disorder, chaos, underdevelopment, all those things happen. Listen, folks, they got the music on. They try to tell me to shut up. I get it. I know how y'all feel. So, Liz, I appreciate you all participating in the program. Thank you for those comments that came in over the air. And we look forward to talk to you all on Friday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. See you all then.
91.3 FM WBNY.